This story happened in the late 1990s. My wife Rachel and myself decided to take a vacation with our two children, Ty, who was 6, and Janie, who was 4, in the Rocky Mountain area. I don't even want to get too specific on where exactly it was for fear of even more retaliation. It started out about as typical as one would expect. We had camped for the first 2 nights, enjoyed the rural wilderness setting, hiked a little bit, which we love to do, but we couldn't go too far due to having 2 small children. On the second night, we were making s'mores when the weather took a turn for the worse. After hours in our SUV just trying to wait it out, the wind blew our tent over and about 10 feet back into some brush. At this point, I put on a poncho and I braved the storm to quickly gather everything as quick as possible. We headed into the nearest town and rented a room at the first motel we saw. Being the 6-year-old he was, Ty was being especially cranky, knowing that things had been cut short. After Rachel trying to unsuccessfully deal with him while I paid the clerk, an older man who was in his 60s. The clerk looked at Ty and said, "Can I tell you a secret?" "Yes," Ty shyly replied. "There's a carnival going on in town the next 3 days. Maybe if you don't give your parents too much trouble, they'll take you and your cute little sister," as he smiled and then gave a friendly wink toward Janie. I then asked if they had laundry equipment so as to dry off all our clothing and blankets, to which he told me was down the hall on the left, on the upper floor, actually near our room. Ty immediately started asking to help with the laundry, of course. Rachel gave the man a genuine thank you and took Janie to the room while I took Ty to handle the laundry. The motel was a 2-story building with a hallway in the center with vending machines and an ice machine down the hallway, right next to the laundry room. The laundry room had entrances on both sides. Each side of the building was a straight shot of rooms on the lower floor and on the balcony, basically set up the same way on both sides. It was pretty much empty, aside from a station wagon in the parking lot that had been running with the windshield wipers on, and us. After starting the wash and getting back to the room, we decided some soda and snacks sounded good, so I went and grabbed 4 Cokes and some chips. Damn, I really wanted that whatchamacallit bar, but I don't have more change on me. So I took the stuff I had gotten back to the room. At this point, it was time to switch the wash over to the dryers. So myself and Ty were going to take care of that, and I asked Rachel if she had a little bit of extra change on her. I really wanted that chocolate bar. I went down the hallway as I sent Tyler into the laundry room directly, and I grabbed myself the whatchamacallit bar, and I just entered the laundry room from the opposite side, since the vending machine was closer to that end of the hall. As I entered the room, there was an odd-looking man in his 40s with thick Coke bottle glasses who was coming in the other side of the room. He seemed startled when he saw me come in. I looked at him. There was no other wash going on. He didn't have any clothes with him. I said, "Can I help you?" He said, I saw this young man in here by himself, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay and there was someone with him." I said, "Yes, that's my son. I'm keeping an eye on my kid. We've got this." At this the man abruptly left and headed down the stairwell. I went to go back and help Tyler switch over the laundry, but something just made me want to look back out to see what was going on, and I saw him get in the station wagon that had been in the parking lot and drive off. Now this was kind of odd, but I decided that me and Rachel keep a good eye on our children, so they'd be in the room with us. Whatever was going on with this weirdo was not something I was too concerned with. We finished the laundry, switching it over to the dryer. We went back to the room. The rest of the night was pretty uneventful. We woke up in the morning. We decided to go out to the carnival. Most of the day went pretty well. It was enjoyable. They had bucking broncos, a demolition derby. There were rides for the kids, cotton candy. After the demolition derby was over, We stopped at one of the food stands, which had some tables and chairs about 15 feet away from where you get the food. We had asked Tyler and Janie what they wanted to eat, and we sat them down. I told Tyler, keep an eye on your younger sister. We're just going to grab some food. We went up to the window, and as we were ordering, we looked back, and this same odd man with a woman in a weird-looking blouse with flowers on it were quickly walking away with Ty and Janie, carrying Janie and walking with Ty in the hand of the woman. "Hey, what are you doing?" They were out of sound because of all the stuff going on with the carnival. The children didn't hear us yell. So we turned to run after them, and as we started to get close, we saw them jump in the station wagon with Janie and throw Tyler in the back seat and slam the door. I screamed. The man quickly jumped in the driver's side of the station wagon. The woman jumped in the passenger side, and they started to take off. We jumped in our SUV to chase after them. Damn! The engine didn't start right away. I forgot about the toggle switch for anti-theft. I flipped the switch, turned it on. They were already up the road. Luckily, their vehicle was older, and mine had a good amount of power. So we were catching up to them pretty quick. Wouldn't you know it, they turned into the police station parking lot. We followed them into the police station. The back door opened. Ty jumped out, holding Janie's hand, pulling her, crying. The man jumped out the driver's side door, and the woman went to run up to the police station. I ran up to the station wagon, and I punched this guy in his mouth so hard that he fell over on the ground. At this point, cops were already coming out of the building, where they cuffed and arrested me for assault. I couldn't believe this. My wife and I were trying to plead with the police officers, explaining what happened. They would hear none of it. While sitting in jail overnight, waiting to go in for my arraignment the next day, I'm speaking to a man in the cell about how absurd this is, and he's got a distraught look on his face. He explains to me that him and his wife's child came up missing the day before, and they went in to report it. As they were leaving the police station after reporting it, they got pulled over for having a broken taillight that he says was not broken before they went into the police station. The cops searched his vehicle and, quote-unquote, found drugs that he says he never had. They charged him with reckless endangerment of his child that was now gone and missing because they said that him and his wife were busy getting high instead of watching their children. The entire night in this police station jail cell, I did not sleep. I went into court the next morning, and they sent me to talk with the prosecutor, who offered me a plea deal at the arraignment, oddly, to just plead to disorderly conduct and get out of town, and they would drop the charges for assault. While I continually tried to explain what had happened and how this man had taken my child, he finally got angry with me, and he said, "You city folk come down here thinking that you're just going to cause all kinds of trouble, not watch your children, and then when the sheriff's brother picks your kids who you left alone up to take them to the police station just to report it because they were alone, you're going to make this about him." After hearing this, I just pled for the disorderly conduct, and I paid the fine. I went back to the hotel room. My wife was there with our 2 children, where I explained what was going on, what I had been told in the jail cell. We packed our stuff up, we put it in the truck, and as I'm looking across the street, I see in the restaurant parking lot the sheriff sitting in his vehicle just watching us. So I take a quick walk around our SUV, and wouldn't you know it, our front blinker was busted out. At this point, I knew something was amiss. I got in the truck and I repeatedly tried to start it, intentionally not flipping the anti-theft toggle switch, knowing that the engine wouldn't start. and the sheriff came over asking me if there was a problem. I told him our SUV had broken down and that I'd be calling my brother, who was a mechanic, try and get him out there by the next day to fix the vehicle for me so that we could go home, and then I'd be out of their hair, but I'd need to rent the hotel room for another night. The sheriff had an angry look on his face. He said, "Well, y'all just make sure and get your city butts out of our town." And he went back over to his vehicle and then drove off. As soon as he drove off, I got my wife and kids, we got into that SUV, and I drove 100 miles an hour all the way to the county line. Now, being that this was in the 90s, we had a cell phone. It was one of them older flip phones, but there was no service in rural areas. Until you got to the city, you didn't have a phone. So my wife was constantly trying to make calls to tell people what was going on. I finally told her to give up until we got to a more city area, that the phone just wouldn't work, and that she needed to calm down. We were out of the county. We were on our way home. Luckily, we had just gotten out of this without things getting as bad as they had gotten for the guy that I met in the jail cell. About halfway home, I was still trying to calm my wife, holding her hand, just gradually saying nice things to her. Surprisingly, Ty and Janie were doing really well. They were in the back seat playing a game of slug bug. Every now and then, Ty reaching up and punching one of us when he sees an old Volkswagen. We were on the freeway getting more towards the city area. About halfway home when the phone rang. I picked it up and I knew the voice on the other end immediately. "Hello?" "Yeah, I was just calling to make sure you had given us the correct information and to let you know that just because you had pled down from the assault, that the investigation on child endangerment isn't over and you might still be hearing from us. So I wanted to make sure you hadn't committed fraud and given us a false number and false address to go along with it." I just hung the phone up. Rachel asked me what was going on, who it was, and I handed her the phone and told her to block that number, that it was just one of those Indian scammers. I didn't want to scare her any more than she already was. Upon getting home, I went to take some stuff up to the back door, and our back door was busted in. I went in the house. All that was done was our kitchen table was flipped over, and the food was ripped out of the fridge. We had called the police. Nothing had been stolen. I didn't mention to the police what had happened up in this town or the call that I got from the sheriff. Being that this was other law enforcement, I didn't want to be trying to make accusations against other police officers. Once they left, I explained what had happened to Rachel. Our landlord came over to check the damages, and we had explained to him that we had gone on vacation and that we had run across a rowdy crowd. We didn't get too deep into it, but that for the sake of him and his place, we would really appreciate it if he just cut our lease and saved us all the trouble of anything that may have come from this vacation. He was a good man. He was friendly. He agreed. So within a month, we were out of there. Now, the reason I'm telling this story now, a little over 20 years later, is Tyler is 27, Janie is 25. Janie is going to college in another state. Tyler lives one city over, or I should say lived one city over, with his wife and their 2 newborn twins. 2 months ago, Tyler and his wife came home from a night out after having someone else babysit their children at another house, to their back door being kicked in, their kitchen table being flipped over, and food being pulled out of the fridge, thrown all over the floor, with nothing else that had happened. Upon him calling and telling us this, I explained what had happened when he was younger and what had happened when someone broke in our house and how this was an exact match. We got together, we talked amongst each other about how back when this had happened, we had come straight home. There was no way for someone from that town to get to our house. this had to be a much bigger and wider issue. They decided to move in with us so that as to always have someone home even when other people are at work. We all went out, we got our CCW licenses, we took gun courses as to be able to protect ourselves and properly use them. 2 weeks ago, our police from the city showed up to our door knocking, saying they had gotten anonymous reports of a drug addict living in our house who was unstable and multiple people in our house owning guns. At this point, I went out on the porch with the police. I explained to them the break-in that had happened over 20 years earlier that was on record, the break-in that had happened to my son 2 months earlier that matched it exactly, how they moved in with us, nobody in our home was drug addicts, and how we had legal weapons to protect ourselves because we were in fear of whatever was going on. To which the police informed us that they would have to report to CPS, the report that was given to them, and we would be hearing from CPS. CPS came out yesterday, and they are demanding that everyone in our family go to take normal drug tests on a bi-weekly basis to prove to them that we're a safe home for my grandchildren to live in when we have done nothing wrong and committed no crimes. I don't understand how this is 20 years later. I have to live in fear for myself and my family. My family has to live in fear. And then to top it off, we have to deal with the police and CPS over an anonymous report. We never told anybody that we got CCW licenses. We never told anybody we got guns. Sometimes in this crazy world, you have to learn to protect yourself because you can't depend on anyone else.